Awesome.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I introduce you to Antonio Sanchez. Antonio Sanchez, thank you so much for coming out.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. It's awesome to be here.
Absolutely. We are celebrating our 1000th lesson today, and who better to celebrate with us than Antonio Sanchez? An unbelievable solo. If you guys are here for the first time, welcome. And like I said, this is our 1000th lesson. So we've done 1,000 of these live lessons, and all you Edge members out there know what we're talking about. And like I said, we're here to celebrate and to show a little bit or talk a little bit about creative soloing and freedom behind the drums. Now, before we get going, just wanted to talk a little bit about Antonio. You're a 4-time Grammy Award winner. You have played with some of the biggest artists, Pat Metheny, Chick Corea, Michael Brecker. You also have a couple solo albums coming up. Is that correct? 2
albums coming out, but it will be my 4th and 5th solo albums.
Awesome. When are those coming out this year?
They're coming out April 29th is the one called 3x3, and June 9th is called the Meridian Suite. One is the 3 different trios, and that's why it's called 3x3.
Yeah.
And this next one is with my band Migration, which is I wrote a 1-hour-long composition, basically, and that's the Meridian Suite.
Awesome. So guys, make sure you check those out when they come out. And you can follow Antonio on Facebook and Twitter at Antonio Drums X. Also on Instagram at Antonio Drums 1. And his website is antoniosanchez.net. So be sure to check those out. Follow him online if you can. And I just wanted to say also a huge thanks to Sean Brown and Yamaha for bringing Antonio out. We emailed them and we were thinking, we got a big lesson celebration coming up. So can you help us out? And they came through for us. Also, thanks to Remo and Zildjian for helping this whole event happen. So, and you guys, if you guys saw on the posts and stuff, we are going to be giving away a Yamaha snare. Check this out. It is the Yamaha Absolute Hybrid Maple Snare. And we're going to be giving it away to a random commenter on YouTube. So once this lesson is on YouTube, post a comment on what your favorite part of the lesson was. And we're going to compile all those comments and draw a lucky winner on May 1st. So your cutoff is the end of April. All you got to do is post a comment on what your favorite part of the lesson was, and you have a chance to win this beautiful snare. So for all you guys watching, wait until this goes on YouTube, submit a comment about your favorite part of the lesson, and we will be giving away that snare then.
So the better they talk about me, the more chances they have of winning it?
That's the idea.
I like that.
So, all right, so enough about enough of the housekeeping here. Let's just get into the lesson content. So creative soul and freedom.
Yeah, I feel that drummers sometimes they are a little misguided when it comes to soloing. Drummers tend to work by themselves for a long time in their little practice room, working out all this combinations, all these licks, all these fancy combinations that you can do while you're soloing. But a lot of the times you're basically regurgitating stuff that you've been practicing by yourself. And, I did that for a long time, and that's cool, except that I felt like I was not really in the moment. When I'm in a band and everybody's soloing and everybody's playing and we're interacting, I really like to be in the moment. And I realized that I wasn't because of all this million combinations that I had worked out by myself in my practice room. So I had to make a little bit of a mind shift, start thinking different about soloing and about how to approach this amazing instrument. And it's funny because if you have played for a long time like I have, you have a lot at your disposal just by reflex. It's easy for me to just fill bars and bars and minutes and hours of just random playing without having to think a lot. And it might sound impressive to some, but nowadays my focus is to really try to tell a story when I'm soloing. It should be like language. Whenever you're talking, you should have punctuation marks, and you should make pauses, and you should pronounce your words in different ways. And there's a lot of similarities between human language and playing. So my idea is to emulate human language as much as possible, in the sense that it needs to tell a story. And there's many ways of doing it. and I would like to talk about some of them,
Sure, yeah.
if that's okay. So the main thing we need to address is something called motivic development.
Okay.
And a motive is an idea. And I strongly believe that anything can be a motive. Anything can be an idea. What is going to make it become an idea or not become an idea is what we're going to do with it after, right? So if I play anything random, it might sound random at first, but if I try to make sense out of that randomness, then it becomes an idea, it becomes a motive, and you can start developing that.
Okay.
And this comes from a concept that I call the random line concept. The random line concept is very basic. I used to play a game with my mom when I was a kid, where the game is just, you have a blank sheet of paper, and you have two players, and you have a pen or a pencil. So one of the players draws literally a random line. It's just one continuous line, but you shouldn't be thinking what that line is. You just draw it. And then you give it to the other player, and then you see the line, and you try to find some shape to it. So if it's a curved line, then you're like, okay, maybe if I complete it here and then I make this over here, then all of a sudden you have a car or a house or something like that. So, it's a very simple little game. But the idea behind it is that from randomness, then becomes something concrete, something solid. And that's the idea behind what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
I don't want to think ahead of time what it is that I'm going to play. I would like just to play absolutely anything that my hands want to play, even without thinking, and then that's when the thought process begins.
Okay.
Right? So I can throw anything with my hands, and then that's why space is so important, because space is what allows you to think and then try to finish the phrase.
Okay. I see what you mean.
So a very clear example. I love this example because it has also history. So what I'm going to do now is just play a very common drum lick that pretty much all of us could play. It's nothing too complicated. But what I'm going to try to demonstrate is how that can either become an idea or can become nothing.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. The lick or the idea is this. That's it.
Okay.
Very simple. So if I do this and then do something completely different afterwards, it doesn't become an idea. I'm going to play it as an example. I was just playing by reflex.
Yeah.
I was not trying to think of anything except for letting my hands do what they do.
Okay.
And now, the same idea, right? Let's put some beat to it, some time. And I'm going to choose to do, let's do 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, like if it was swing, right?
Okay.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a very famous lick that Max Roach played. So to me, that's one of the most perfect examples of developing something. You have this sound, you repeat it, and then you answer it. Okay. So it's the question and answer. So for example, to everybody that is watching right now, a perfect example of question and answer is dun 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 dun.
Dun, 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 dun.
Good intonation, man.
Thank
Or
you.
dun 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 dun.
Dun, dun.
Perfect. That's question and answer.
Question and answer. Okay.
Yeah. So when I do anything soloing wise, I always try to do the question and answer thing. I leave space and I try to develop an idea.
Gotcha. So is that the biggest thing you think of when you're doing your solos? Is that question and answer type of concept?
I mean, it's all together, but what this does is it helps your playing to have a sense of organization. Because like I did on the first example, anything that you play can sound random, right? But what you're going to do after that is what is going to determine if that became an idea or not. And I'm going to give a very extreme example right now. Something that probably anybody would say, well, that's not an idea. That's just a random hit. So let's say that I go like, that's my idea. How am I going to develop that? That's the big question. So I'm going to play that idea. Repetition is very important. So I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to leave some space and then see where it takes me. The hard thing about what we're trying to do here is that you actually have to think. You have to think all the time in real time. When you are playing, a lot of times you are not thinking that much, which is, it's almost a contradiction that you can play without thinking. But a lot of people can spend their whole life soloing and doing a bunch of very fancy stuff and never really say anything meaningful. You're like babbling on the drums. So this concept is just for you to be able to organize your ideas a little bit more and tell a little bit of a story. And it can be a small story, it can be a long story, it can be a simple story, it can be a really complex story. But one of the key ingredients is to remember what you did. Because if you don't remember what you did and you try to play something really fancy right off the bat, then it's going to be really hard to repeat it. Gotcha. So what I encourage everybody to do is to play something very simple in the beginning that you can remember. So let's go on with that idea that I just did. So what I'm going to do now is play that idea, leave some space, repeat it, and see where that takes me and see how I can apply this question and answer concept. Okay, here we go. So it's something very simple. I repeated the idea, I played it in a couple of different ways, and then I try to find an answer for that question that I posed for myself, which is, what comes out afterwards? Blah, 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 blah. And that's something that I chose right now, but it could be something completely different. And I'm always very careful of dynamics. Dynamics are paramount when it comes to soloing. If you solo at the same level all the time, it's like if you're talking like a robot. There's no inflection. And inflection, when you're playing, it's one of the most important things you need. Another thing that I take into consideration a lot is contrast. You cannot have loud without having soft, right? So if I play and everything I play is loud, then everything is going to be at that volume. But if I do so the drum set has a huge range. And I've seen many drummers that just play from here up, and they don't exploit at all the range that you have from loud down. They just have loud and really loud. And I really think that you have the power to be as quiet as the quietest member of the band, or you can drown the whole band if you want, because that's the power that the drum set has.
So how do you get into that mindset where you can start thinking of creative ways to answer the question that you just asked on the drums?
Well, I think it's just a matter of, one, thinking. You know, we have to get used to actually thinking. It's not something that comes out immediately. You have to practice this methodology. But I think the more you do it, the more you start feeling comfortable with the unknown. You know, because all of this is stuff that you've never played before. That's what's so cool about it. You know, you don't have to depend on your licks that you always play and that you practice for a million years. What is so cool about this is that you can play fresh, new things every single time. And of course, you're going to use your technique, you're going to use your abilities, you're going to use even the same licks that you know how to play, but in a different way. You know, you're going to swap them, you're going to turn them around, you're going to flip them around, and it's going to give you just a wider amount of possibilities, you know, a wider range in your explorative endeavors as a drummer. And to me, that's the most fun. You know, I've been playing for so long that it's easy for me to get bored with my own stuff. So this allows me to kind of keep exploring constantly, but I have to remember to leave space and to be patient. Patience is so important when it comes to this, because if you're not used to leaving space, you can be playing and 2 seconds feels like 2 hours. You know, especially for us drummers that we love to fill every single moment that we can. So I think it's very important for us to become friends of silence and friends of space, because what you don't play is just as important as what you play. So the idea behind all of this is for your playing to get a little more organized, and for your explorative nature to become a little freer, you know, and not be so scared of throwing something on the drums that is completely different and new. And maybe sounds that you've never even experimented with before. You know, like I always encourage drummers to try out just weird stuff on the drums, because that can become something. You know, just to give you an example. That.
He's so cool, yeah.
So the thing is, okay, that is just a sound, right? So what are you going to do with that is what is going to determine if you're developing something, telling a story. And a lot of the things that I'm playing are free of time. There's no time.
Okay.
But then you can start going into time and playing some of the same ideas. So I'll give you an example. Nothing that I'm playing right now is planned out. I'm completely just improvising and just waiting to see where the music takes me. You know, I'm not pre-planning absolutely anything. The only thing I pre-plan is, okay, I'm going to start with this sound. And then if I leave space and I try to make sense out of what I just played, that's where the random line concept comes into play.
Got it.
That's my random line. Now let's see how we can finish that line so that it becomes something.
So a challenge, I guess, to you guys out there watching was to take something completely, like like completely random.
Yeah.
And just have fun with it. Try and leave some space.
That's the beauty of it, you know, that if you just give yourself some time to think and you have the patience to develop something, you can literally play absolutely anything and you can make some sense out of it.
Very cool. Very cool. And organizing your playing, it helps you organize your thoughts, or helps you organize, like you said, building a story. Building something that's interesting for people to listen to, right?
And, you know, I take my cues a lot of times, not so much from other drummers, but from other instrumentalists.
Okay.
For example, like you said, I've been very lucky to play with great musicians for a long time. And one of these musicians I've been playing with for almost 15 years is Pat Metheny. And he's one of the most lyrical musicians, lyrical guitar players. He always tells a story when he is playing. So, for example, if we're doing a gig with him, and you know, we used to play a lot with Christian McBride on the bass trio. So, Pat plays this ridiculous solo, beautiful, lyrical. Then Christian McBride plays just an unbelievable solo. I have to kind of go that way too. I cannot just play some, you know, crazy stuff. I have to really think and make sense and have patience with what I'm doing and build something, you know, tell a story. That's, to me, that's the most interesting thing to do musically nowadays. And if I see a drummer or any other musician that is just kind of blowing chops and, you know, regurgitating licks, that loses my interest very quickly. The drummers and musicians that really make me stay with them, focus on them, are people that I can tell they're really thinking, you know, and they're really trying to stretch the boundaries of what they have never done before. And to me, that's jazz. That's why it's so cool. It's like sports, you know. If you go to an arena to see a hockey game, you know, nobody planned out what's going to happen. Obviously, it's all random. But they use their abilities to transform whatever randomness is going on, and then make it become a play, and then ultimately score. You know, it's the same thing on any instrument. You know, you take that randomness, you organize it, and then hopefully you'll come out with something worthwhile in the end.
Cool. Very cool concept, I think. Easy to try out for yourself. I also like what you were talking about. You had a clinic the other day. You were talking about how technique shouldn't get in the way from this. I know a lot of people might not be able to go that fast around the drums, or they might be stuck to a certain lick that they've been practicing all the time. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't think you need the greatest technique in order to start messing around with this, you know, because the ideas can be very, very, very simple.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can give a couple of examples of that. The main thing is to remember what you just did. So it's, I mean, technically what I did is very simple.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to remember this, right? Then I'm trying to remember, and then I'm trying to remember those accents, and then I'm trying to remember. So I have those 4 things going on at the same time. And you can, I mean, it's like if you're talking about, a specific subject, you can start talking about something and then you move on to something else, but then you go back to what you were talking about. And then you talk about something else and then you go back to the second idea or the first idea. And the cool thing about this is that people start following what you're doing. It's like if I'm talking to you and I'm telling you, I love scrambled eggs, but the movie was just terrible. I mean, those 2 things, you're going to be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing, when you're playing music. You have to make sense out of what you're doing.
Gotcha.
So if I just go like, I've heard a lot of drummers solo like that. It's just randomness. And it's in time, and it's cool, and it has good technique and everything, but you're not telling a story. You're not saying anything meaningful. You're just talking about the scrambled eggs and then about the movies.
Yeah, okay.
That's the idea behind this.
Cool. What about a different concept of soloing? I know you brought some loops to demo, building solos off of music or off of a loop or a bass line or something like that.
Yeah, so I'm going to play a little example. This is just a 12-bar blues.
Okay.
Some major blues on B flat. And what I'm going to do to exemplify this, I'm going to play a chorus, which is 12 bars of just time, right? And swing straight ahead. Then I'm going to play a chorus, which is another 12 bars, of just complete randomness. I'm not going to think about what I'm doing. I'm just going to let my hands do what they do.
Okay.
And then the third chorus, which is the last 12 bars, I'm going to try to develop 1 or 2 solid ideas. And this takes us to another subject, which is the subject of vocabulary and historical context of certain kinds of music. When you're playing swing, you're dealing with a kind of music that has been around for a long time and has a rich history. So obviously, if you're going to try to solo in this context, you need to have some knowledge of that history, where it came from, and you need to have some vocabulary at your disposal. Otherwise, you're just going to sound random. And people that know that style, if you start playing not with the right vocabulary, immediately they're going to know, oh, this guy doesn't know how to play that style.
Yeah.
And you can be playing in time, you can be playing the 12 bars, you can be very knowledgeable, but if the vocabulary is not there, then it doesn't sound like the real thing. So what I'm going to try to do is not only build something coherent, but also play within that specific style.
Okay.
Okay? Hopefully you were able to tell the difference between the second chorus especially and the third one.
Yeah.
Even though the third one seemed a lot simpler, it was a lot harder for me to play because I actually had to stop and think and try to make sense of a couple of little phrases and also take into consideration the historical context of what I'm playing. The vocabulary that jazz and swing have to have for it to sound like the real thing. The second 12 bars that I played might have sounded more impressive maybe, because they were faster, they were flashier, but they were not in the style, and I did not develop a single musical phrase. It was just randomness.
I clearly hear the difference.
Good. I hope people that are listening at home, it was obvious, And I would like to do it again.
Okay.
But this time I'm gonna try to because this was just 12 bars, right? So I'm gonna try to do maybe 2 or 3 choruses, so that you can really see how I'm trying to develop, different ideas over a more extended period of time.
Okay.
So I'm gonna start also with just some timekeeping.
Okay.
This is a lot harder because, like I said, I have to be careful of the stylistic approach, and I have to be careful of playing in time with the sequence, obviously. Right now it's a computer, but then, hopefully, ideally, you would be playing with a band. And when you are trying to do this, you have to keep the form going, which is 12 bars. And then you have to try to tell a story. It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to think about. But it's a lot better to start getting used to it now than later.
Well, I think a lot of drummers, too, when they get to a solo space, the first thing that goes to their mind is, what kind of licks can I throw in here? Exactly. How am I going to fill the space up with time? They don't even think about what was happening before that, right? So it's it's a mind shift, I guess, different way of thinking.
Yeah.
Do you have another song or another loop to do?
Yeah. So, the cool thing about this is that you can do it in any style. It doesn't matter if you're playing swing, if you're playing Latin music, if you're playing Brazilian, funk, rock, it doesn't matter. If you want to take a solo, or even when you're playing free like we were doing in the beginning, if you want to take a solo, this characteristics should, I think, always be present. And one of the things that I love doing when I'm playing over a vamp, which, a vamp, as some of you might know, is just like a steady rhythm that is going on, maybe between the piano and the bass. And while this vamp is repeating itself, then one of my favorite things to do is maybe almost comp for myself, in the sense that I'm playing something steady, like if I was just part of the rhythm section, and then all of a sudden I'll break into a phrase and then go back to the beat, and then repeat the phrase, go back to the beat, and then start developing that phrase that I'm doing in between me always going back to the beat.
Okay.
So that's one way that I like approaching things.
that for another 20 minutes. That's awesome.
So the fun thing about that is that we were talking about leaving space, right? And giving yourself time to think.
Yeah.
So it might seem like I'm not leaving space, but my space is just the groove, right? Because I don't really have to think about the groove. I just have to play that. I'm playing with the groove, and then that's my space. That's where I allow myself time to think. And then I'll throw a phrase, and then go back to the groove. Throw the same phrase and expand it a little bit. Go back to the groove. Think. Give yourself time to think. Throw a couple more phrases, embellish it a little more, throw a different phrase in there, go back to the groove. Cool. And that I found through the years of playing in front of audiences, that really kind of keeps the attention of the audience. It's very, because it's so unexpected.
Yeah.
You know, and another way, just to give you an example of the same thing, of how you could approach it so that it's not that exciting and it's just, you know, random licks. It's cool. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, except that I'm not really building anything. I'm not telling a story. I'm just listening to the groove, and I'm just, you know, playing some licks on top of that. And I think it's a big difference between doing that and then trying to create stuff on the spot.
Gotcha. One more loop you said you had.
Yeah. So, you know, this is a different kind of groove. This is actually a groove that I wrote for this record that I was telling you about, 3x3, which is 3 trios, and each trio has plays 3 different tunes. And the second trio on the record is a guitar trio with John Schofield and Christian McBride. And I wrote this groove especially for them because the two of them are 2 of the funkiest people on the planet. Yeah. So I wanted to write something really funky and cool, but that was in 5/4. But I wanted the 5/4 to be something that, you know, because when you think 5/4, sometimes you're thinking like a take 5 kind of 4. But this one is a long 5/4, and you know, I'll count it off when it starts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's like a 4-bar phrase. this kind of soloing, I'm trying to develop stuff over a longer period of time. And now that I added the tambourine, that really helps me to be aware of all the subdivisions that I'm playing around that, because that's my metronome. Even though I have like a cowbell going on here, I'm trying to play off of that and then phrase around that. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, it sounded incredible. The way where you took it was just awesome. So we are running a little bit low on time here, and I still want to talk about some open solos. You guys had a lot of cool stuff to talk about with that. But before we do, just letting everyone know here, we will get to questions at the end, but there's probably a couple thousand people online live right now. So we will sift through and answer a few of them, and we'll get to that after the open solo part we're going to talk about here. But before we move on, just wanted to remind everybody watching that we are going to be giving away a Yamaha snare. Check it out. It is a nice black Yamaha Absolute Hybrid Maple snare. And to win this, all you need to do, once this video is on YouTube, post a comment on what your favorite part of the lesson was, and we will pick a random commenter by the end of April and give you the snare. So, open solos.
So, open solos can be intimidating because you have this white sheet of paper where you can write absolutely anything. Nobody's telling you what to do, and you can, the possibilities are endless, and that can be intimidating, of course. So what I like doing usually on open solos is a little bit of the concepts that I was talking in the very beginning, where you can throw something completely random and then have that be your initial motif or idea.
Okay.
And usually when I do something like this, I like to build it in a way so that my solo has kind of like an introduction, something that is memorable and that is going to be memorable to me and memorable to the audience.
Okay.
So it can be a sound, it can be a pattern, it can be a groove, it can be anything. But I like to keep it very, very memorable. That will be the key word. So after I do my intro, then I try to start expanding that intro into other things. And this might be in time, out of time. It doesn't matter. The thing is for you to always try to remember what you've been doing so that you can recall it at any given moment. So I'll do the intro, then I start developing the intro into something else. Maybe I'll be in time, maybe I won't be in time, maybe I'll go into time later. And I want my solo to have different sections and to have a lot of dynamics. I cannot stress enough how important for building a solo dynamics are, especially this kind of solo where it's just open. So I want my solo to have a bunch of different sections, and then one cool thing that I like doing, you can take it from a jazz standard or from classical music, where like a suite, for example, that it has a beginning, and then sometimes when it ends exactly the same way it began.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why it's so important for you to do something very memorable to you and to the audience in the beginning. That way the audience is going to recognize it. Like, oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
She played that in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be important for you to also remember, because sometimes you extend the solo and you're like, oh, damn, I can't remember what I did in the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's very important to have a very clear beginning. So I'm going to do maybe a short version of that, and hopefully I'll get my point across.
Wow.
So, what I try to do is really give it some shape. And, since I started with that in the beginning, I wanted to end with that, but also give it a little extra touch to make sure that you knew that was the end. There's nothing worse than playing this crazy, amazing solo, and then you don't give it a good ending for people to even know when to clap. So, I like doing little things that are memorable, like, that thing that I did, and then this kind of sound. I love those kinds of things. And that, I started out of time, then I brought that same idea into time, then I played around with that time a little bit, different types of orchestration. Then I did this, that sound, and I repeated that like 4 times just to make sure that you establish that. Because if you play it 1 time, it's cool, but if you play it 2 times, then people are like, oh, there it is again. And if you play it again a little later, you bring it back into the conversation. And then went back to that in time, then out of time, and then finished it. And I just tried for the solo to have some kind of cohesiveness and to sound concise. That's all.
Well, it definitely sounded very cohesive. That was really cool. Very good demo. Thank you so much for all your input there on soloing and freedom. I mean, there's a lot to take away from this lesson. You guys are probably going to want to watch it a couple times. I know I sure am. But can we get into some questions here? You cool with that?
Absolutely.
Cool. And for those who are watching who aren't Edge members, just letting you know, we do this every day. We have a live lesson Monday through Sunday, I wish it was 24 hours a day, but 7 days a week. And you can sign up for a free membership at drumeo.com/trial if you wanted to give it a shot. We are also filming an exclusive course with Antonio that's going to be released to Edge members in the next little bit. So drumeo.com/trial. All right, so there is a ton of questions. So I'll get through a few of them here. First one's from Carmen. Says, "Hey Antonio, my question is, how can I, a beginner, learn to expand my vocabulary and then be able to play that vocabulary effectively? Do you memorize pieces, or how does that process even work?"
To expand your vocabulary, I think is very important for you to start copying other people. That's the main thing that I did for many times. I just stole information from other people. And that's the way to do it. So if you like a certain drummer, study that drummer as much as you can and identify some of the things that make that drummer sound unique. And then grab those things and just try to make them your own. I think that's the coolest thing about getting inspired by other drummers and then not wanting to sound like them, because that's something you want to avoid. Especially, like, for example, I love a lot of my contemporaries, but I cannot sound like them because we're playing some of the same gigs, right? So if I did that, then they would rather call the original guy. Why would they call somebody that sounds like a copy of somebody? But in the beginning stages, I think it's great to copy and try to emulate people. And just to give you an example, I love Roy Haynes.
Okay. Yeah.
Roy Haynes is one of my men. I mean, he really inspired me to try a bunch of different things on the drums. And one thing that I got from Roy was the interaction between the hi-hat and the snare drum. Because a lot of people, when they're playing swing, they confine themselves to 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, right? So Roy doesn't really do that. He keeps the ride going, and the ride is the most important part of the equation for sure. But then he would do stuff like this. He's not doing 2 and 4. He's just playing around with that kind of sound. So what I did is I spent hours, days, months with just that, and then trying to see what I could come up with, all of a sudden, that starts becoming part of your arsenal, of your toolbox. And I think in the beginning stages, that's what you should be focusing your attention on.
Cool. Hopefully that helps you out. Here's a quick question from Lab Rat Radio. It says, how do you balance your drum life, your work life, and your family life?
Oof, that's the $1 million question right there. I'm still trying to find out. It's hard, you know. We do this because we love it, right? I love playing, and if I could, I would just play drums. But unfortunately, you have to deal with a lot of other factors that are going to keep your career in good shape.
Yeah.
And one of those factors is just the business side of things, you know. So I spend a lot of time on my computer writing emails, answering emails, just trying to book gigs, trying to figure out when we can rehearse, and trying to write music nowadays, you know, that I'm composing a lot of music. And I don't have kids. I have a wonderful fiancée who happens to be an amazing singer, and we sometimes work together. She's on a couple of my records. I'm on her record. And, you know, I'm lucky that we can share music that intimately. So that makes things easier. You know, if I was dating somebody that was a lawyer and had absolutely nothing to do with what I do, maybe it would be harder to balance it. But luckily, you know, she's very cool, and you know, when I go out on the road, she understands, and she goes out on the road sometimes too. And you know, it's always trial and error, always trying to adapt to the situation. But to me, the main ingredient is I can be on tour, I can be very tired and exhausted and hungry and in a bad mood. But if at the end of the day I'm playing music that I like, that I love, then that makes it all worth it.
Cool. Here's a question from Pat Petrillo. It says, Antonio, my congrats on your success. Can you discuss your influences early on us, or for us?
Hey, Pat, how you doing? Thanks for the question. Well, my first influences were rock and roll. You know, my mother, she's an avid music fan. I was saying on the clinic yesterday that she's so cool that 2 years ago she asked me for Christmas if I could bring her the last Led Zeppelin Blu-ray, the last David Bowie CD, and the last Jack White CD.
That's awesome.
That's my mom.
Yeah.
So when I grew up, I listened to all the stuff that she was listening to, which were the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Cream, The Who, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, Santana, Led Zeppelin, all these great bands that had great drummers, thankfully. So my first love was rock and roll, you know? And I think I'm kind of a frustrated rock drummer. Okay. And then, you know, something terribly wrong went along the way, and then I ended up playing jazz. No, I'm kidding. But, you know, I just, those were my first influences. And then the more advanced I got, the more I wanted to research other kinds of music that would allow me to maybe take the drums a step further and feel a little bit more freedom, you know, which that's what we've been talking about this whole time, you know, about trying to be as free as you can on your instrument, and no matter what style you play. Very
cool. Great question, Pat. It's good to see you out for the lesson. Here's a really good question. This one's from C.W. Jones. It says, phrasing seems very important with what you're doing. What do you recommend for techniques to link ideas together that are in time?
Well, obviously practicing with a metronome is extremely important. You know, that will allow you to be able to get your ideas into the grid that is time. So if you're practicing with a metronome, you have to be very certain of what subdivisions you're playing all the time. There's nothing worse than playing with, I don't know, a piano player or a bass player that they start doing phrases and you don't know if those were 8 notes or triplets or, you know, it's confusing.
Yeah, I can see that.
So as a drummer, you cannot afford yourself, you know, that kind of a mistake. You have to be so clear on everything you're playing. So first of all, you know, you practice enough so that all your subdivisions are very clear. And then I think you can start applying what we were talking about, you know, and just trying to lose the fear of playing new things. playing licks is great, and I think if you're in the beginning stages, it's good for you to memorize and get some of those licks under your belt. But as you start growing musically, I think it's very important to, leave those licks a little bit aside. They will always be there, and then try to, try to figure out different ways of playing some of those same licks and experiment to expand your vocabulary.
Cool. Another question here from Andy O'Brien says, welcome to Drumeo, and thanks for coming in for our 1,000th
My
lesson.
pleasure, thank you.
Yeah, he says, how much do you feel the setup of a drum kit affects your ability to be creative? He says, I play in a lot of house kits and don't really get into be able to tweak them prior to playing. It gets to the point that I'm focusing so much on where my drums are that I fail to execute my ideas.
Man, I feel you. That's one of my worst nightmares, to not be comfortable with your gear, so that the gear gets in the way of music. That's, I hate that situation. And, honestly, what I try to do nowadays is remove myself from those situations as much as I can. I know that for a long time, I could not afford that luxury. So, I think there's a stage in your life where you're just gonna have to make lemonade with the lemons that you're provided, And sometimes, unfortunately, you go and play in a club and the kit leaves a lot to be desired. There's wing nuts missing, and everything just starts crawling when you're playing. It's a nightmare, It's not the ideal situation. But I think you have to kind of internalize and mentalize yourself to, okay, I'm going to do the best of this with this situation, and I'm going to try to make music even if it's with a crappy kit.
That's a terrible situation, Andy. I think we've all been there one point or another, but
too many times, unfortunately.
Too many times, yeah. Okay, we'll do one last question. Okay, and this last one is from Fred. It says, Jared and Dave and the Drumeo crew, I signed up for Drumeo Live on the day it was announced 3 years ago and cannot tell you how much you have meant to me in the development of my drumming journey and even friendships. Drumeo is a family. Congratulations on the 1,000th lesson. Looking forward to many more. Thank you so much, Fred. He says, unfortunately, I'm not able to remain for the entire lesson because he's a band rehearsal, which is great, but wish you all the best, and here's to another 1,000 more. So thank you so much, Fred. And that was more of a shout out, so I'll do one more question.
Okay.
And I'm just literally randomly picking here, guys. Last one goes to Febby. Febby says, do you have the same approach to soloing on a gig when maybe asked to do an 8-bar solo as you do for a full-blown solo at, say, PASIC or something?
No, maybe if you only have 4 bars to solo, 8 bars. You can definitely do it. But sometimes if I only have 8 bars to kind of show my stuff, I would like to present something that is very strong, and it could be something that you've worked on before, or it can be, if you're feeling adventurous, related to what we've been talking about for the whole hour. So that's just a personal choice. And it's risky, because when you play like this, there's always the risk that you're not gonna sound that great because you're actually improvising in the moment. When you play all the licks that you've been playing your whole life, there are more chances that you are gonna succeed in a way, but you're not finding anything new. So it's a matter of if you want to take that risk or not. Most of the time, I like taking that risk, and I trust that my ears, my technique, my musicality, and my judgment are gonna make it sound good regardless of what I do. So you have to really trust yourself in order to do these kinds of things. And if you start doing them now, if you're a beginner, if you start doing them now, they're gonna become part of your MO. And 10 years from now, when your technique is great and you feel a lot more comfortable, this is gonna be just part of your daily life.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important to start as soon as possible with this kind of mentality on how to explore your instrument for better and more musical results.
Very cool. try things out, make mistakes. That's what it's all about, you know. Okay, we went a little over, but that's totally fine. Okay, again, you guys, just to wrap things up here, now we are going to be giving away a Yamaha snare. Check it out. It is a nice black Yamaha Absolute Hybrid Maple snare. And to win this, all you need to do, once this video is on YouTube, post a comment on what your favorite part of the lesson was, and we will pick a random commenter by the end of April and give you the snare. And for all you guys watching who like this kind of lesson format, we do this all the time at Drumeo. You can get your free membership at drumeo.com/trial. Again, I want to thank Sean Brown and Yamaha, Remo, and Zildjian for helping make this event happen, and a huge thanks to you, Antonio,
My
for
pleasure.
coming out.
Thank you so much for having me, and hope we do maybe the 2000 lesson. We'll see.
Absolutely. We could do the 1001st lesson, the 1002nd lesson.
Sounds good to me.
Whatever you want. Do you want to play us out? Give us a solo?
Sure, absolutely.
Have fun with this. Take your time. I've heard some insane solos from you in clinics and online as well. So have a lot of fun with this. And again, thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
See you guys
Thank
all
you
later.
guys.